People missed their connection, like latent fear in interacting with her, that they might say something wrong like calling her Meghan Markle instead of her actual name. The room did not erupt when King Charles delivered the announcement. It fell completely silent. Before him lay a constitutional instrument carrying his signature, the final product of weeks of secret consultations. Its meaning was unmistakable. Harry, Meghan, and their household were being permanently separated from Britain's future crown, ending every remaining expectation that they might one day return to royal power. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you do not miss a single update. Charles, Britain's reigning monarch, entered Buckingham Palace's briefing room without greeting anyone. Camilla watched him place a folder on the table while William and Anne studied his face. Two constitutional advisors waited beside the closed door. The constitutional instrument, a document setting out a change to the royal order, had been reviewed. Nothing remained uncertain. The Crown, the monarchy as an institution, would now protect William's future reign, but it would also turn a family separation into an irreversible act of state. The king remained standing as he announced the decision. Harry and his descendants would be removed from the line of succession, the official order identifying who may inherit the throne. Every succession-related privilege connected to Harry and Meghan's household would end. Camilla lowered her eyes and stayed motionless. William felt the future becoming clearer. Yet he could not mistake that clarity for victory. His father secured the crown by crossing a boundary that no apology could erase. Charles spoke Harry's name once, then stopped. His palm remained pressed against the folder, as though holding it shut required his strength. The monarch had rehearsed the words, but no rehearsal could protect the father beneath them. Anne noticed a sealed page beneath the signed announcement and asked why it had been withheld. He answered quietly that it contained the documented account of the incident that had forced him to act immediately. Across the Atlantic, Harry received the decision through a recorded call from a senior palace representative, preserving the exact words delivered to him. Meghan stood close enough to hear the formal statement. He said nothing. Then his expression hardened, and she realised this was not another warning or negotiating tactic. The separation was complete. Yet when he demanded to know what evidence had justified such finality, the representative mentioned the sealed page. That hidden account changed the meaning of everything. Charles had not acted because of one public argument. He had acted because something inside the family's last attempt at reconciliation had convinced him that his younger son could never safely return. To understand that devastating choice, the story must now turn toward the four people standing on opposite sides of the crown. Behind the constitutional language stood four wounded people carrying different versions of the same family tragedy. Charles believed he was protecting the monarchy. Harry believed his father was erasing him from it. Meghan saw the announcement as a final rejection, while William confronted an unbearable truth. Securing his future crown might require surrendering the last fragile connection to his brother. The decision had clarified the succession, but it had torn open every wound the family had failed to heal. Harry walked away from the recorded palace call and gripped the back of a chair. The crown, the monarchy as an institution, rather than merely a jewelled symbol, had shaped his life from birth. As a child, he had been called the spare, a blunt royal expression for the younger sibling born behind the direct heir. William had been prepared to inherit the throne. While his brother was expected to support him, their closeness once softened that cruel imbalance. Now it had become the fault line dividing them. Meghan watched Harry struggle to contain his anger. She had entered royal life expecting public purpose, but its rigid hierarchy and relentless scrutiny had left her feeling trapped. Even after stepping away, she remained emotionally connected to the institution through her husband and children. Harry finally turned toward her and admitted that the announcement did not feel like a constitutional decision. It felt like his father declaring that he no longer belonged to the family. William carried a different kind of pain at Windsor. He admitted privately to Catherine that part of him felt relieved, and the confession immediately filled him with shame. She took his hand as he explained that the future was now institutionally secure. Catherine understood what he could barely say. The prince had gained certainty for his children while losing another piece of his brother. William had not celebrated the decision, yet Harry would always wonder whether he had secretly wanted it. Meghan refused to accept that the matter was finished. She asked whether the constitutional settlement, a formal arrangement changing who could inherit the throne, could be challenged. Harry revealed through the recorded conversation that palace lawyers had anticipated precisely that move. Attached to the announcement was a documented account containing earlier warnings, rejected conditions, and records of private negotiations. The file had been built carefully, not merely to explain the removal, but to defend it against resistance. Charles sat alone after the briefing and unfolded a handwritten note from his younger son. The king read it twice, lingering over words written before anger had consumed their relationship. Instead of destroying the message, he placed it inside the constitutional folder and closed the cover gently. His choice had not emerged from simple vengeance. It had grown from grief, fear, and one private Windsor ceremony identified in the documented warnings. That ceremony had begun as an attempt at reconciliation, yet one unrecorded conversation transformed it into the moment trust finally collapsed, and the point of no return. The final rupture did not begin before cameras or beneath newspaper headlines. It began behind a closed door at Windsor, where Charles had offered Harry one last path back into limited royal service. What followed was a conversation so tense and a private record so consequential that everyone present would later recognise it as the moment reconciliation stopped being difficult and became impossible. Months earlier, Charles had summoned his younger son to Windsor's private library. Windsor is a royal residence where deeply personal family matters can be handled away from Buckingham Palace's public machinery. Anne attended as a family witness, while a constitutional secretary, an official who records decisions affecting the monarchy, waited outside. No cameras were allowed. Every person had agreed that the discussion would remain confidential unless the proposed arrangement collapsed. Harry listened as his father offered him a restricted ceremonial role, meaning he could attend selected royal events without returning as a full-time working member of the family. The conditions demanded political neutrality, complete confidentiality, and acceptance of William's future authority. The Duke immediately challenged the final requirement. He argued that serving beneath his brother would reduce him to a silent symbol, useful during ceremonies, but powerless whenever his family faced criticism. Charles refused to retreat. The king explained that service to the crown, the monarchy as a governing institution, had always required personal limits. He had accepted restrictions he hated, and William had spent his life preparing for responsibilities he never chose. Harry answered by raising Meghan's treatment, accusing the palace of defending its reputation while allowing his wife to suffer. He insisted that Meghan had been expected to remain silent even when hostile stories threatened her dignity. Anne watched her brother's composure crack. Charles struck the table with his palm and insisted that he was trying to preserve a place for his son, not erase Meghan's pain. Harry then slid a prepared list of conditions across the table. The document demanded independent control over public appearances, communications, security arrangements, and commercial partnerships. His father read every line, closed the folder, and delivered the sentence that ended the negotiation. No parallel court would exist under his reign. A parallel court meant a separate royal operation competing with the official palace. Harry rose without offering his hand. After he left, Anne examined the documented proposal and found a disturbing reference to an outside communications advisor. A time-stamped email attached to the private record showed that several conditions had been shared before the meeting began. She quietly told Charles that their reconciliation framework might have been compromised from the start. Someone beyond the palace had known what Harry intended to demand. Charles understood the betrayal immediately. William's future authority had been treated as negotiable, while Meghan's public position had become part of a strategy prepared outside the room. The king ordered one final face-to-face meeting with his son, not to reconsider the proposal, but to force both men to say aloud what the documents had already made clear. When father and son next entered the same room, no advisor would absorb their anger, and no ceremony would disguise their pain. Charles had faced political crises, public grief, and the crushing discipline of royal duty, but none of it prepared him for the look in Harry's eyes that evening. The king wanted a final answer. His son wanted recognition of years of pain. Between them rested the unsigned settlement, waiting like a blade neither man wished to touch, but both knew would soon fall. Charles closed the sitting room door himself. No aides remained inside, and the silence excluded William, Camilla, Meghan, and every palace official who might have softened the confrontation. The unsigned settlement, a formal agreement designed to change Harry's constitutional position, rested nearby. Anne had already examined its central terms. She understood that the document would either secure the succession or destroy the family's final hope of reconciliation. The king spoke first. He explained that the decision was no longer about punishment, headlines, or public embarrassment. Harry was living independently of the crown while retaining a constitutional path toward occupying it, meaning he remained legally connected to the order of inheritance. William could not prepare for a stable reign while his brother demanded royal authority without royal limits. Camilla had warned Charles that delaying the choice would only deepen the damage, yet he had delayed it anyway. Harry leaned forward and demanded that his father look at him, not the crown. He insisted that Meghan had endured years of judgment, while the palace protected its own reputation. The Duke accused the family of offering conditional love disguised as duty, then expecting gratitude for every restriction. Charles removed his glasses and placed them beside the document. Fatherhood, he admitted, was precisely why the settlement had remained unsigned for so long. The accusation cut both ways. Charles told his son that trust could not survive when private disagreements repeatedly became public weapons. He then revealed the evidence through a documented account containing a time-stamped email. Harry's Windsor proposal had reached an outside media strategist less than 24 hours after the confidential meeting. Meghan's concerns appeared throughout the material, but so did details that only someone close to the negotiation could have shared. Harry denied authorising the disclosure. When his father asked who had received the proposal, however, he refused to answer. That silence changed everything. The king offered one final escape, a signed renunciation, meaning Harry would voluntarily surrender his succession claim, followed by a private family reconciliation. His son rejected it immediately. He would not sign any paper that treated his children as dangers to the monarchy. Harry walked out without looking back. Charles remained beside the unsigned settlement, knowing the father had failed, even if the sovereign might still succeed. He summoned William and Anne, because the future king's support would give the decision constitutional strength, while his sister's approval would give it moral weight. Camilla received the news moments later and understood that the private conflict had entered its final stage. The confrontation ended without reconciliation, leaving the crown's future to those who would inherit the consequences. The king's signature carried enormous symbolic force, but the machinery surrounding the crown demanded more than one man's anger or sorrow. Every clause had to survive legal scrutiny, parliamentary resistance, and the judgment of the future sovereign. Yet the most powerful moment came not from an advisor's argument, but from Anne asking her brother one devastating question. Can you live with this as his father? Charles did not answer immediately. Constitutional advisors explained that the settlement required royal assent, the monarch's formal approval of a legal measure, followed by parliamentary approval from elected lawmakers. Relevant Commonwealth realms, independent countries sharing the same monarch, would then formally recognise the change. A private family order could express the king's wishes, but it could not securely rewrite the succession by itself. That distinction mattered, because one procedural failure could reopen Harry's path and turn the announcement into humiliation. William understood why his endorsement carried such weight. The change protected the future represented by him and George, the young heir being raised to inherit after his father. Any uncertainty surrounding Harry could eventually become a crisis during George's adult life. Anne's support mattered differently. Her reputation for discipline and service could give the decision moral credibility inside a family already fractured by suspicion. Anne ignored the legal pages and studied Charles instead. History, she warned, would record clauses, votes, and constitutional reasoning. Harry would remember only that his father had signed the document removing him. Then she asked whether the monarch could live with that memory when the crown was gone and only the family remained. Her brother lowered his eyes, knowing there was no answer that could make the choice painless. William faced his own fear. He worried that supporting removal would make it appear as though he had eliminated his brother for personal advantage. The prince imagined George reading that accusation years later and questioning whether his father had protected him or used him. Charles answered firmly. Refusing responsibility would not erase the crisis. It would merely transfer the same burden into William's reign and eventually place it upon his son. A senior advisor then opened an annotated constitutional opinion and revealed a dormant clause through its documented legal commentary. The settlement could take effect only after coordinated legislative approval. Until that final confirmation arrived, Harry's removal remained vulnerable to challenge. The official repeated the warning clearly. One delay could give the Sussex household time to seize public sympathy and pressure lawmakers. Charles picked up the pen with a trembling hand and signed. He passed it to William, who hesitated before looking toward Anne. She gave no comforting smile, only a slow nod. The future king added his name as witness, accepting both the security and the shame attached to it. Harry and Meghan were already preparing their answer. Meghan began shaping a statement while her husband examined the palace documents for weakness. The ink had barely dried when the struggle moved beyond palace walls, and the first consequences struck both households at once. By dawn, the announcement was no longer a sealed palace decision. It was a global rupture. Phones rang across royal residences. Broadcasters abandoned scheduled programming, and advisors rushed toward offices still dark from the night. Yet the true force of the decision was felt in one quiet California room, where Harry read the final wording twice before realising that his children's names had disappeared with his own. Palace Communications released the settlement with a statement focused on constitutional stability rather than personal condemnation. Constitutional stability meant keeping the legal order of royal inheritance clear and protected from future dispute. The words sounded restrained, but their effect was historic. Royal schedules changed immediately. Harry and Meghan lost access to succession-linked briefings, private updates concerning the future throne, and ceremonial consultation, the process allowing senior royals to help shape major public occasions. Harry stared at the revised succession document on his tablet. Archie and Lilibet had vanished from the official order beneath William's family, and their father whispered that they had never chosen this conflict. Meghan sat beside him, reading the same lines with rising fury. She argued that Archie and Lilibet were carrying the punishment for decisions made by adults. What the palace called clarity felt to her like inherited rejection. Charles watched the first live broadcast at Buckingham Palace without speaking. A presenter described the decision as ruthless, and Camilla immediately reached toward him. The king stepped away and faced the window, refusing to answer. She understood his silence. He had achieved the certainty advisers demanded, yet the world was now judging him not only as a sovereign, but as a father who had removed his son and grandchildren. Meghan began preparing a televised statement, a recorded public address intended for broadcast across major networks. Her draft accused the institution of hiding personal retaliation beneath constitutional language. Harry initially approved of its force. Then he reached a paragraph attacking William directly, accusing the future king of supporting the removal to strengthen his own position, the Yeats. Duke stopped reading. He knew those words would transform a legal struggle into open war between brothers. Catherine made the unexpected move. Through a private recorded call, she contacted Harry without palace advisers listening and asked him to delay the statement. The princess did not challenge the settlement or defend Charles. Instead, she asked whether one night of anger was worth destroying every possibility that his children might someday know their grandfather. Her voice remained calm, but the appeal struck where legal warnings had failed. Harry looked toward Meghan and admitted that Catherine's question had changed something. She resisted at first, fearing delay would allow the palace to control the story, but she saw his certainty weakening. William's name remained on the screen between them, carrying years of rivalry, loyalty, and unfinished grief. For the first time since the announcement, the crisis moved away from legal power. Harry requested a private conversation with William before Meghan released the statement, leaving the crown's fate in the hands of two brothers. There were no secretaries, no cameras, and no father waiting to intervene when William answered Harry's call. For several seconds, neither brother spoke. The years between them seemed to crowd into that silence. Diana's death, shared grief, competing duties, public accusations, and every failed attempt at peace. Then Harry asked the one question William had feared. Did you want this to happen? Catherine had arranged the conversation through an encrypted private call, a protected connection designed to prevent outsiders from listening or recording. She left William alone at Windsor after making him promise to hear his brother completely. In California, Harry stepped outside his home, so the conversation could not become another household strategy session. Catherine's intervention mattered because she understood that advisors could negotiate legal terms, but only the brothers could decide whether their family war would continue. William chose his words carefully. He acknowledged supporting the constitutional settlement, but denied designing it as revenge. The prince explained that the decision followed years of contradiction. Harry wanted an independent public life while retaining authority connected to the crown, the monarchy as an institution. Royal influence came with restraints, and no one could claim its power while rejecting every rule protecting it. Harry's anger broke through. He accused his brother of gaining everything: the throne, public protection, and the power to define who counted as loyal. The Duke said William would inherit a secure future while he and Meghan were being written out of the family's identity. His brother answered that inheritance had never felt like victory. It had cost him freedom before it cost Harry's status, and their mother's death had forced him toward duty when both were still grieving children. William then spoke about Archie and Lilibet. Through the recorded conversation, he admitted that seeing their names removed had caused him genuine pain. The future king insisted he had never regarded Archie or Lilibet as threats. Harry's fury softened, not because he accepted the settlement, but because his children had finally been acknowledged as people rather than inconvenient names inside a constitutional document. Harry revealed Meghan's prepared statement by reading the paragraph aimed directly at William. It accused the future sovereign of using his position to eliminate competition and strengthen his own branch of the family. The prince did not defend himself. He warned that releasing those words would transform a constitutional defeat into a permanent war, one their children would inherit long after the current anger faded. Harry fell silent. Then he deleted the paragraph and agreed to postpone Meghan's broadcast. He would not endorse the settlement, expose the private Windsor records, or attack his brother. Meghan resisted the delay, but she accepted that his decision had come from protecting their children rather than surrendering to the palace. The brothers had not reconciled, yet their private choice prevented grief from becoming open warfare. Just as Britain awakened to the most dramatic royal headline of the new reign and prepared to deliver its judgment, by sunrise the family's private fracture had become a national mirror. Some saw a king defending constitutional clarity. Others saw a father severing his own bloodline. Every newspaper, radio desk, and television studio carried the same names. But one image captured the country's divided emotion more powerfully than any debate. Two strangers outside Buckingham Palace holding signs that demanded completely opposite forms of justice. Broadcasters filled their studios with succession graphics, charts showing the official order of those eligible to inherit the throne. Harry and his descendants had disappeared, while William's branch stood alone as the crown's direct future. Constitutional clarity meant removing uncertainty from that legal order, but the explanation did little to calm the anger. To supporters, Charles had protected stability. To critics, he had used ancient power to settle a modern family conflict. Anne refused to cancel her scheduled engagement, an official public duty arranged on behalf of the monarchy. Questions followed her from the moment she exited her car. She did not break silence or offer a private interpretation. Instead, the documented palace statement remained her only answer. Her steady presence suggested continuity, yet her tightened expression exposed how deeply the decision had divided those closest to the king. Charles watched the first debate turn his grief into political entertainment. One broadcaster replayed footage of young Harry walking behind Diana's coffin, placing the image beside the removal announcement. The king looked away. His son's childhood pain had become part of the argument against him. While Diana's death was being used to judge a decision she could never answer, Camilla was absent from the room, leaving him alone with the consequences. Meghan felt the coverage reducing her family's suffering to palace strategy. She wanted to release the harsher statement immediately, but Harry asked her to wait. The Duke explained that another public battle would define Archie and Lilibet long after the headlines disappeared. Meghan resisted, then recognised that he was protecting their children rather than defending the institution that had rejected them. Public division sharpened outside Buckingham Palace. The fictional Daily Chronicle displayed a solitary crown above an empty chair beneath the headline, "The line is drawn." Near the palace gates, one woman raised a sign declaring duty has a price. A man standing beside her answered with another, "A son is not a threat." Their silent disagreement captured what hours of commentary could not resolve. Then certainty arrived. During a live recorded broadcast, a senior presenter announced that the required parliamentary votes had passed. Those votes were the lawmakers' formal approval needed to make the settlement constitutionally complete. Harry's removal could no longer be reversed by private regret, family pressure, or a sudden change of heart. The world had chosen its arguments. William's future stood protected, and Anne's public duty continued. Yet Charles now had to confront what his announcement had preserved and what it had permanently destroyed. Victory no longer felt like triumph, it felt like silence. The constitutional crisis ended with signatures, votes, and a revised line of succession. But the human story ended somewhere quieter. Charles remained king. William's future became secure. Harry retained his voice but lost his place in the crown's inheritance. While Meghan accepted that no return to royal influence remained possible, there was no triumphant winner, only a monarchy preserved through a decision that permanently changed one family. The final constitutional notice entered the royal record, the official archive preserving decisions made on behalf of the monarchy. The line of succession, the legal order determining who may inherit the throne, now ran without dispute through William and his children. Harry's household retained its personal family identity, but no future claim to the throne or institutional authority remained. The legal uncertainty was over, the emotional damage was not. Charles ordered the emergency operation closed and allowed the palace calendar to resume. No celebration followed. The king wanted the crown, meaning the monarchy as an enduring institution, to demonstrate continuity without appearing to rejoice in his son's exclusion. Public duties continued. Official meetings returned, and palace statements became quiet again. Yet every ordinary task carried the weight of someone who was no longer included. Alone in his study, the monarch opened the constitutional folder and removed Harry's handwritten note. He read it once more, pressed it flat with his palm, and placed it among his personal papers rather than the official records. That choice mattered. The settlement belonged to history, But the message belonged to a father who could not legally restore his son and could not emotionally discard him. Harry reached his own decision in California. He told Meghan that he would not pursue another public confrontation. She accepted his choice, and together they resolved that Archie and Lilibet would inherit the truth about their family without being raised to chase a crown that had rejected them. Their children would know where they came from, but royal status would not define where they were going. William then received a private written message from his brother. "I will never agree, but I will not make the children carry this war." The future king read it twice before replying with 4 words, "Neither will I ever." Harry offered no reconciliation and the prince requested none. Still, their exchange drew a boundary around the next generation and ended the threat of open family warfare. During a recorded private conversation, Charles admitted to Anne that the monarchy was safer, but the family was smaller. She answered that duty did not erase grief. It simply required a person to keep walking while carrying it. Her brother finally accepted the verdict. The announcement secured one clear succession and ended the possibility of Harry and Meghan operating both inside and outside royal authority. Its deepest meaning was sacrifice. Charles chose the crown over reconciliation. Harry chose independence over inheritance. William accepted a protected future shadowed by an absent brother. The palace doors closed. The succession stood and the monarchy moved forward stable, diminished, and permanently marked by the price one family paid for the crown.